What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Recovery Bros podcast. It's a weekly YouTube show where two guys in recovery, myself and Doug, talk about all things addiction and mental health science, recovery, giving people real world tools that they can use every single day. All right, Doug, what's up?
What's up, brother? How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you? Feeling a little sluggish. I had a migraine. I was telling you I had a migraine the other night, and I don't get them very often. But oh, man, I think it was the allergies in Austin because I live in Bozeman now, and so I came back to Austin. The allergies just like stabbed me in the brain.
Dude, I hear you. I mean, I don't get migraines, but I feel super like sluggish and congested and almost like neurologically off when my allergies are
Mhm.
really bad. It's been like crazy here in Baltimore too with the pollen and everything. And I think it happens this time of year with the seasons changing and things warming up, and you got like all the stuff that's been hibernating for the last like 4 or 5 months. It just all of a sudden
I
being
know,
released.
I know, I know. It just explodes, right? Yeah.
So headlines in the last week or so, as we're recording this, is Britney Spears voluntarily checked herself into rehab. She was arrested on
Yeah.
DUI, I think, last month, and I think her whole family's been worried about her, and I think it's obviously a really good move for her because she was trying to avoid jail time, from what I read.
Mm. Yeah, I saw the article, and obviously this is a one of those situations where we had to talk about this the other day, which is an interesting conversation, which is what is the relationship to fame and addiction, right? Why is it there? And I think Britney Spears is a remarkable case study on that because she has been in the limelight since she was a little kid, and so she has had some struggles that everyone is aware of. She's been taken advantage of, apparently, obviously, by many people, and so she's had her struggles. But you have to applaud anyone who refuses to give up. You have to applaud anyone who is in the public eye, has a story behind them that either people think that there's something gone wrong with them or that there's something something that they're an irresponsible person, perhaps there's a story behind them, right? That is probably very untrue, uh, and they just refuse to give up. Like you have to applaud that effort.
Totally. In her case is an extreme one because if you were to put together like a Mount Rushmore of greatest female artists, I mean, her, at least in my lifetime, your lifetime, her name would, by a lot of people, her face would be, up there, right? And she was super famous from a young age, had a great career, and then she was taken advantage of by people in her family, and then had mental health issues. She was exploited for that. And, you talk about the relationship between fame and addiction. I think we're past the point where people believe that money can buy you happiness. We know that that's just BS unless you're broke. Um, that said, you look at like some of the richest people in the world, and the divorce rates are pretty high. Mental health issues. If you look at Anthony Bourdain, look at Matthew Perry, I can go on and on with examples of people that you would think because of their level of fame and their level of success that they would never have struggles. And I think what happens is, and we've talked about identity on the podcast before, their identity is so wrapped up in that thing that once they lose that thing, like who are they? And it becomes this harsh realization. And the other thing I'll add is, and I learned this from interviewing people about dopamine, is if you think about dopamine and what it is and how it's the molecule of more, it's often called, and then you pursue more and more and more, it's like, how do you top what Britney Spears has done? Like, how could she top that? How could you top like landing on the moon if you're an astronaut? How could you top winning an Oscar if you're an actor? It's just very difficult to do so. So um, that drive and that like pursuit and that level of meaning and accomplishment becomes very um, like stuck, and you're unable to kind of move forward without like chasing after something that gives you this massive sense of euphoria. And that's why drugs is often a solution for that.
Yeah, this is actually a really there's several things that are interesting about addiction and fame and addiction in regards to dopamine. Like you take anyone of that kind of stratospheric success, take people, obviously Britney Spears. I mean, let's go back early as Elvis, right? Who was maybe the first mega superstar, individual superstar of the modern music era. I mean, nothing like that had ever happened, and he came from nothing. And so now he was given everything, had extreme excess, had the capacity to get whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, wherever he wanted, and everyone loved him. And you you override your dopaminergic system, your drive to pursue things that are interesting to you by giving them to you whenever you want them. And all of a sudden nothing is enough. Nothing nothing will ever satisfy that need. And then also when you think about the status part, which I think you're talking about, which is, I was given, they achieved a level of status and esteem globally that it's just unrealistic. You can't hold it. It can't, and more than likely you can't get it back. And so once it's gone, everything more than likely would feel dull, right? It would feel gray. You feel like you'd lost yourself because you would define yourself by that status because that status is incredibly interesting, attractive, and valuable. So you have this override of your dopamine system where nothing feels good anymore because everything that you would want to pursue, and like you said, it's a molecule of more, it's also a molecule of pursuit and motivation. So if everything that you would normally pursue through motivation is given to you for nothing, you will want nothing after that. Everything you technically will want won't feel like what you want, and you're left in this hole. It's terrible, and it's unfortunate. And there's a great quote that I really like. It says, "If you think money solves your problems, wait till you see the problems they afford."
I completely agree with you. And I think to add layers to this, specifically like somebody like Britney Spears, that level of fame, it's like you have so many people pulling at you, wanting things. Um, then you have people that are like leveraging your fame for their success. And then you come to a point where you feel so alone because it's like this weird um, mental trap that exists. It's like, okay, who's my friend? Who's not my friend? Who can I trust? Who can't I trust? Are they actually reaching out to me because they genuinely like me for me, or they genuinely only like me for the stage act or the performance version of me, right? And it becomes this horrible trap that you live in, and you start to lose yourself, from what I understand, in that you start to shift away from your true person because now you're constantly having to react to what your fans want, what the audience wants, what your manager wants, what your publicist wants, what the media wants from you, and you just become a version of yourself that you don't even know.
Well, that's the other thing I think you hit on a good point is the transactional nature of your brand, your identity. Everyone around you, you have to consider whether or not they're there because they want to be there or they're there because they're trying to get something from you. And that level of thinking makes sense because if you don't consider them a potential threat, like a user, someone that would just take from you, well, then you're at risk from being taken advantage of. And I think for naive, caring, empathetic people, that's a real risk. And I think you might see that more often in people who have a desire to be liked. They really want to be liked, and so they'll give of themselves to be liked by people. Um, and I can't even imagine how difficult that would be to just never be able to trust that the people that are around you are there because they want to be with you, not because they're hoping to get more for less.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really sad life to live in where you don't even know yourself, and then on top of that, you don't know who's around you and what their intentions are. And
Yeah.
then you throw in just you know, the mental health issues that can come as a byproduct of all of that: depression, anxiety, paranoia, stress, and then you end up numbing yourself with drugs or using drugs as a way to escape. And then I think we've talked about this, because you're more successful and people want to, stay around you. It's harder for people in your circle to check you and hold you accountable, because the risk there is, a, they're like, I don't want to like mess with this person's situation anymore. B, if I check this person, or if I hold them accountable, am I going to still be part of their inner circle? And then C, maybe that person's also enabling at them with that same type of behavior, and they're enjoying the party life too. I mean, it's a really sad world, and I think good for her for stepping up and checking herself in. I know her kids played a big role in getting her in, and I just hope that she gets better. I really do.
Yeah, the point you just made is really important. The checking of behavior thing, that's a common thing you see in the fame situation where you see the the wild behavior of famous people. It's like normally when you're with your friends, when you're hanging out with your friends, you start doing stuff, crazy party stuff too often, and it isn't valuable and it's getting annoying. What they'll do is they'll say, that thing that you're doing there, that's annoying. It's annoying and and we don't like it. And so you have to stop. You should really stop because we don't want to be around that as much as you're doing it. It isn't good for you. It isn't good for us. Stop it. It's over. In situations of fame, like you mentioned, there's people around who are basically getting a free ride to do dumb shit because the limelight's on the famous person. So they're just a person in the side of the photo who no one knows, but they got to do all the crazy stuff. They're going to really suffer very little, if any, of the consequences. So why would they check the behavior? It's a free ride to do crazy stuff. And so as a result of that, that behavior of this famous person who has a quote unquote an entourage of people goes unchecked, and that part of them grows bigger and the responsible part of them grows smaller. And then of course they end up being what you see in a lot of those situations, unfortunately. It's not the singular cause of it, but it's a big cause.
Yeah, I mean, you see this play out. Like, I don't know if, I mean, we both love the show Entourage, and you kind of see this play out in that show as well, right? And what fame can
Mm-hmm.
do to you, what the roller coaster ride can do, and then how that can lead to addiction, and then how like your support group can then um the challenges that exist within that because of just the lifestyle they're leading, or they're like, oh, I don't want to interfere here, or he's got enough on his plate that I don't want to like, that played out very well in that show of like the rise and fall of people in the entertainment business, and then how people on the outside are constantly pulling at you, whether it's like romance interests, whether it's people that are working for you, whether it's friends, whether it's just random people that you're meeting that impact like the way you live your life.
Yeah, and to that fact also, the fact that even if you do take on this extraordinary effort of trying to change yourself in your life, it's not going to change everything fast enough. People are just going to still define you by the worst things you've ever done, right? Because it's the sensation, right? And that's what they like about Hollywood and famous people is the sensational part of it. They don't want the part that looks like their life. They want to watch the part that they can't get. And so it's like, oh, oh yeah, that's the person that did that crazy thing 2 years ago. And it will always be that, unfortunately. It's very rare that you see someone make a remarkable transformation where they become someone so so removed from who they were, and they do it with such authority that the world says, "Oh, that is who you are now." That's all we'll say from now on. Go ahead.
I interviewed Adrian Grenier on my podcast several years
Yeah,
ago. And, it was mainly because I was just such a fan of the show. And I was curious. I was like, man, like, how does becoming a character like that for so long? Because you have to remember that show ran for, I think it was 8 seasons, plus they did a movie afterwards. And that's
yeah,
been that's one of the shows that rarely, a lot of the group has kind of, for the most part, stayed together. And the show is constantly talked about on a regular basis. And just asking about it, he was telling me how he ended up morphing into Vincent Chase
mm,
and behaving like Vincent Chase, and how that got him into trouble, like in the real world, because now it's like this is not a TV show anymore. This is like reality, and real relationships are being impacted. And he talked about the work he had to do on himself to like get himself back to center. And now he's married, and he's actually married to the girl that checked him and was like, hey, if you don't like it, take care of these things, like we're done. um and so I share that because I think that that's kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago, and that happens a lot where you start seeing what people are responding to, and you start seeing what people like about you, that they don't even really know you, and you end up becoming that person because the attention and the validation is so addicting.
yeah. I
And
know Adrian, and he's a really interesting person. He is not Vinny Chase
no.
at all. He is. I mean, if anyone who's listening ever gets the chance to meet Adrian in person, it's good for you. You're a very lucky person. He's great. He's very interesting. He's very thoughtful. He's very soulful. He's very down to earth. He's very quiet. Um, from what I know about him, and I only spend maybe like a couple days a year at an event with him, and he lives in Austin where I live, and so, but yeah, the guy, if that's true that he did that, because I didn't know him then, but if it's true that he had done that, the person he is now, good work, man.
I think it does happen a lot with people in that space, especially people that have they have mental either pre-existing mental health issues, they had some childhood trauma, or they had something where they don't have that base because there's no playbook for fame. Like there's not when you start to get famous, they're not like, hey, here's what you should do or here's what you shouldn't do. I'm sure there's like certain things that you're advised by, as far as when you're coming up, but for the most part, especially when you're a kid, like what are you supposed to do? And your life is just so different because you're not doing the same things that kids do. Like you're not going to certain things. I mean, I know you and we both know Danielle Monet, and she was in a highly popular show on Nickelodeon called, I believe it's called Victorious. I never saw it, but I became friends with her husband and her, and I had them on the show, and I was talking to her about it, and she was just sharing, um, how that impacted her. Like she wasn't like doing things that normal kids did. She wasn't like going to dances or she wasn't going to events. She was like acting, and it became like this weird thing for her.
Well, and talk about demand, right? You're, at a young age, you're having to be the vehicle for financial demand and financial responsibility. You're having to take on the pressure of your studio saying, hey, if the show's not doing well, we need this. It's like, how do you interpret that? How do you interpret that other than, do you like me or not? Because when you're a kid, that's the reference point. Are they my friend or are they not my friend? Right? And that's good because it helps you work out social navigation. But I couldn't imagine, like, how do you tolerate? I could barely tolerate high school.
Well, here's the interesting thing too. And I had this guy, Dr. K, who's also known as a healthy gamer, on my show a couple years ago, and he's brilliant. But he talks a lot about like mental health and kids, um, and what he said was the reason that social media has become so dangerous for people's mental health is this: is it's become a public scorecard for how well you're doing in life, and and everyone can see your scorecard. Everyone can, for the most, unless your account's like private or something, people can see how many followers you have. They can see what you're doing in your life. They can see who you're following. They can see who's commenting. They can see who's reposting. They can see who's sharing. They can do all that. And this is what celebrities like Britney Spears have been dealing with for decades: is this
Well, that's
public
such a
scorecard of their life, of how you're really doing. And then so you have that public perception, and then you have that internal perception that's like, okay, now I'm on and I'm looking at my own scorecard. How am I doing? How am I doing compared to the person that I graduated high school with? How am I doing compared to this person that I worked with like 9 years ago? How am I doing compared to my parents or whatever? And then you start to create your own scorecard for yourself, and then that's when the slippery slope of just depression and stress and anxiety comes from.
That is such a great analogy, dude. Like, seriously, the idea of like looking at, because I'm 100% guilty of not only believing that my social media is a reference point for people to see where I am and who I am and how I am. I fall into that trap a lot, but I look at other people as like a comparison. I go, oh, they've only grown by so much. Like, yeah, they're making cool content, but they haven't even grown. It's like I catch myself thinking those things, and so I can't even imagine if you were to use that as like an analogy for what these famous people have gone through, because they have this social persona that everyone gets to look at, right? And that's the scorecard, and it must be that times a thousand. And I get anxious as a person on social media with a social media brand all the time. It's literally a humming engine of anxiety for me that exists only because I have this thing.
Well, and it's gotten worse, I think, because of social media. With when it comes to public perception of celebrities, I interviewed earlier this week. This episode will come out sometime in the next few months. I interviewed this guy, Mike Soltis, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, and he was like one of the top PR execs for ESPN for a really long time, like decades. He spent 43 years in PR for ESPN, and we were talking about how media has changed, and I was asking him like about stories and negative press that he's had to deal with ESPN. And anyway, we were talking about, like, back in the day, like the two big sports outlets were ESPN and Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated's kind of, it still exists, but not to the level of ESPN.
Right.
And now, I mean, you have ESPN, you have Barstool, you have Complex, you have, all these other outlets that have FS1, Fox Sports Network, FS1, that have like come up and that are now taking, not only just taking away market share, but now you have these other networks, and then you have blogs, and then you have influencers and podcasters and analysts that all have social media platforms that are now commenting on everything
Hmm.
and reacting to everything. And so if a story goes bad, or if a perception of someone goes wrong, it's not just like, oh, I saw on CNN one night or on Fox one night that so and so like did something he shouldn't have done, and then it's like over the next day. This is like a 2 week process, and it's viral. And you think about that with people who are in the public eye a lot. Um, and I just think it's way more toxic. I mean, look at what just happened with Tiger Woods. It's super
Yeah.
sad. And obviously, I was guilty at, seeing, chuckling at some memes that were being made, about his
Hmm.
situation, because I'm like, I still have a sense of humor about things. And at the same time, I'm like, man, this is really sad, because this
It
guy
is.
is
Yeah.
definitely struggling, and it's horrible. And I love Tiger Woods as a golfer. I'm not the biggest fan of what he's done as a person, but you know, it's been really sad to see the exploitation of him. And because I've very loosely, like lightly, I guess you could say, been in a situation like his where I was addicted to drugs. And I say that lightly because I can't imagine being like him in the and having the level of fame, and also being addicted to drugs and having that constant like worry about what people are going to say about me. Um, and it's just it's a sad situation.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm a huge Tiger Woods fan from a sports perspective. I think Tiger Woods is maybe the only athlete since Michael Jordan that you could technically compare to Michael Jordan. You could say is like Michael Jordan because he did for his sport what no one else could do. He made it a global sport. That's what Michael Jordan did for basketball. Um, and so I'm a huge fan of Tiger Woods as a golfer. Not don't condone the stuff he's done personally, but I'm not going to comment on his personal life because I really don't know it. But it's sad because there are people, you think like when we started Britney Spears, now Tiger Woods. These are people that you would root for, to win. And unfortunately, I think that so much of the media about them that they get to watch is their downfall content because that's what sells and that's what gets likes. And I think it's an unfair representation of what most people think about these people. From if you were to actually pause and ask them if you could root for them, would you root for them to win? I think most people, Tiger Woods, Britney Spears, you root for them to win. I hope that for in these situations that they're if when they're getting the support that they do know that if you were to ask the majority of people that they would hope that they do well, not that they continue to have struggles. And I think that's tough. That's a tough message for these people to receive because the only thing they hear about themselves is the downfall content.
Yeah, and it's such a catch-22 because I've heard like Alex Hormozy talk about this a lot, and I mean others have said it too, and it's so true. Like people will root for you on your way up, and once you get to that top, it becomes like a chopping block, where people are
Yeah,
trying to chop you down left and right, and they look for every excuse to do so. And obviously, with people like Tiger and with Britney Spears, I mean, like the evidence is there where their life isn't where it should be or where they want it to be. So it's kind of
right.
easier with situations like that, especially when they get into legal trouble. But I think generally, it's like there's way more negative attention than positive for a lot of people, especially when they're super successful. Because I do think that negativity not only sells, I think there's some level of, all right, like let's see if they can lose and get back to where they were, because people love that comeback story. I mean, Tiger Woods winning the Masters, I think was it 2019? Was probably, or was it 2020? It was 2019 or 2020.
Yeah, I think it might have been 2021.
No, it's 20. It was 2020. It was 2019 because
Okay.
2020 the world was shut down.
Yeah.
Him winning the Masters in 2019 was like the greatest comeback like ever for what he went through. And people think about how much people love that. Even people who didn't like Tiger Woods love that. Think about Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady won a bunch of Super Bowls with the Patriots. People tended to hate him. Then he went to Tampa Bay, won, and then people all of a sudden respected him because they're like, oh, he's just not lucky. He can do it without Belichick or without Gronk, without the people that were around him during his
Yeah,
time in New England.
I think that what a good takeaway from all of this for people who are watching, who are going through it, and more importantly for those who are supporting those who are going through it, is to say, notice what happens here when you define people only by their downfall, when you define people only by the worst decisions they've ever made, and you constantly remind them that that's who they are and that's why they need to do what they're going to do, that can be a really, really big trap. It can make it feel like they're never going to do enough to rewrite that story. They're never going to succeed enough to be quote unquote recovered in your eyes. They're never going to undo the damage to their image that you have of them. And so what I'd say is, yes, hold them accountable to their poor behavior. Hold them accountable to the stuff that is dragging them down and that would destroy them if they continue to do it, but then encourage the outcome and remind them of where they're going and remind them that they have the capacity to get there. Applaud their efforts, no matter how slow, as long as it's moving forward. And it's not about like, because you're this person, this is who you are, this is what you did, this is what you did, and that's why you have to keep going. It's like that will just tell them that it's never going to be enough.
Yeah, you have to encourage people and you have to like have compassion and you have to, I mean, I think this is like the hard part with parenting somebody an addict, right? Is it's like how do you not enable that person while also holding their feet to the fire a little bit? Where you're like, "Hey, like I don't agree with what you're doing. This is not okay. I still love you. I still care about you." And that said, like I'm not going to allow you to live here anymore if you're going to continue to abuse drugs in my house. It's a tough conversation and I don't know the answer. I don't because I see both sides. I really do. I mean, I don't see
Yeah.
the side of enabling your kids and just being like, here's $100, go buy a bag of heroin. What I do see is that the parents who are like, all right, if I kick my child out, are they going to go and then jump off a bridge because their life is now so miserable?
Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest decisions to navigate because what you're certainly from a parent perspective is what you want is to keep them from being harmed. And so the immediate risk of saying you're on your own, go out and do it is that they could do something dangerous. And you don't want them to do something dangerous, so keep them close. Well, keeping them close if they're using is equally dangerous because that next use could be the last one, right? So you have to you have to figure out a way to say, listen, we're not doing this because we don't believe in you. In fact, we're doing this because we do believe in you. What we're asking you to do is to come along with us and our belief of you. Like you're not doing well. And I say that because you could be a lot more than you are now, and I know it. And that's what we want. We want to go on that journey with you. And in order to start that, it has to be this way, period. Like that's it. It's like that's the greatest act of kindness you could ever give someone is to tell them that they're more than they believe themselves to be, and then say, "Look, I'll go with you, and we can find it out together." I truly believe that to be true. You could be much more than you are now. You don't see it. I do. Come with me this direction. It has to be this way, and let's find out. Like that's the most kind. It's such a loving act because it's brave.
So I think the biggest takeaway I want people to get from this is there's an old saying, I think it's like an AA, that's like it doesn't matter if you're like living on Park Avenue or on a park bench, like addiction doesn't discriminate or something to that effect.
Right? Yeah.
And I think that people believe that if they achieve a certain level of status or success or financial gain, that their problems are going to go away. And it's just not true. I mean, oftentimes it creates more problems as we've seen. And I think that like we fall into this trap of when I get there, then when I get this, I'll be happy. When I get that, I'll be happy. And it's like you have to work on yourself now and where you're at, and truly build your own identity and where you're and what you're with what you believe and who you are, because no matter what, like everything can be stripped away from you. If you're like a champion marathon runner and then you all of a sudden lose your legs, like who are you? Or
Mm,
if I lose my vocal cords and I can't speak, like who am I without a podcast? Or, and it's a tough thing to grapple with, because it's, the odds of something happening like that are very slim, but that stuff does happen. And then you have to also understand that like people are people. Like that's the other takeaway, is that like Britney Spears is no different than you and I. She's just had a very successful career in a public setting. And she's incredibly talented at what she does. But as a person, we're all human and we're all
yeah,
flawed. Um, yeah. I mean, so what's your biggest takeaway, you think?
I would say that um, I agree with you with the statement that there's there isn't a single person who's protected from this, right? No matter how much you have, it just puts you in a different arena of anxiety and fear and risk, right? That we're all trying to figure this thing out. I don't think anyone really has it figured out, and if they do, gosh, I wish they'd tell everyone. But um, the idea I would say is that addiction and depression and anxiety are a difficult conversation because they're the ones that ask you to reveal something to the world that history has asked you never to do, right? That to tell people that maybe you don't have things under control, which is a risk, and it's a big risk. It always has been socially, and no matter how much messaging we put out there, I think there's always going to be that fear, which is if you knew exactly what I was doing right now, you might not want me ever again. You might banish me from your life, and ooh, that would feel like being annihilated. And so there's no one in the world who's protected from that. And people in the public eye, people whose lives are always in public view, right? Oh man, to say, well, no, it's actually it's what you say it is, and it's worse than that. If they're willing to do it, people like Britney Spears who've checked themselves into treatment, that's a statement that it's it's either as bad as you say it is, or it might be worse. And I don't care who knows because I need to save my life. To do that is unbelievably brave. It is such a statement about which direction that she wants to go in her life, or anyone in that situation wants to go in their life, and you have to applaud her for it.
Respect to people who admit they have a problem and want to get help for themselves, and they don't want
Yeah,
to continue to self-destruct or destruct other people's lives around them. Well, Adam, I love doing these like kind of reaction stuff, here and
yeah,
there, because I think it's important to like keep people up to speed with like what's going on. Because I think people sometimes will see something like a Britney Spears or Tiger Woods, and they'll have their own opinion or be like, "Oh my god, like how? Like why didn't Tiger Woods like call an Uber, for instance?" And it's like, well, do you really think he's going to call an Uber with who he is? Do you think he trusts any Uber driver? I
there's
think he
no
should
way
have.
that could be safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think he should. I mean, if it were me, I'd hire a private driver that just lived, on my campus or something that could just drive me everywhere, especially if I was prescribed medication like that. But it's also like if you think about what's like one of the hardest things for someone who's like old to give up. It's like their ability to drive, because that's like their sense of freedom and independence. And I think with him too, or other people, it's like I'm a big boy, like I'm do what I want. I'm gonna go drive my car, and I'll be fine. And then until you're not.
Well, plus I think there's also that thing of like, oh, he has a driver. It's like it's kind of like this. If you're an athlete, you should drive yourself.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, like competence. But I like these reaction videos. I think one of the best takeaways that I have actually from this conversation, because Doug and I don't script these, is the looking at the social media scorecard analogy. I think that was such a great revelation for me. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so number one, I want to contribute far less in my own head about that, and certainly want to do it less publicly. I don't want to say stuff like that portrays that that's what people should be doing, or that I would want to do. But it also gives you a real sense of kind of a sense of what these celebrities deal with all day long since they were kids, which is like their lives they are walking around as a public scorecard that people just go, oh, that's them getting an F. That's who they're an F student. Like, look at them. That's who they are. That's how they've always been. And even if they try to do better, they'll go, yeah, but they're mostly an F still. It's like, oh, give them a break.
You know, we're both friends with Darren O'Lean, who co-hosted that show Down to Earth with Zach Efron. I remember talking to him about Zach, and he publicly said this on my show, I believe, but he was saying something like, imagine being like that since you were a kid, that you can't go anywhere
Mm,
without having your photo taken. You can't go to like a restaurant without somebody's, you know, scrutinizing what you're doing or what you're eating. You can't go out. You have to hide. And that's a life I would never want personally,
yeah,
because I just know where that road leads. And, it's all, once the lights go off, the lights go off. And then you
yeah,
have to work on like thinking about who you are without all of that.
yeah. There's no way someone that at a young age can tolerate that kind of social pressure. I couldn't imagine it. Well, Doug, great conversation. For everyone who's listening, comment below your thoughts. Let us know what you thought of the conversation. Let us know if you're rooting for Tiger, rooting for Brittany. I know we are. We're hoping that they both do well in life. We root for every single person in recovery who decides to get help. That's the bare minimum you can offer them, is to applaud their efforts. I don't, maybe I don't agree with everything you've done in your life, but I certainly agree with this.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And comment below with suggestions and your thoughts on this video. Thanks again, bro. Great combo.